Welcome to another episode of Uncensored. Today, we're going in a slightly different direction, and we are going to be talking about something that made on the news with an OnlyFans model who accidentally murdered one of her clients due to a BDSM sex act, which she had no experience with. An OnlyFans model is facing a murder charge after a man who paid her $11,000 died during a BDSM fetish video the two were performing. Very, very sort of scary horror situation for anyone who's engaging in high-risk activities. And I think this story is such a good warning for individuals to really be cognizant of what you're getting into and who you're hiring and who you're playing with, especially with high-risk activities. So, Michaela, 31, recorded the kinky video for her OnlyFans profile with Michael, 55, in his home after receiving the payment to bind him in plastic wrap and duct tape, which resulted in his death by asphyxiation. Despite never engaging in BDSM before, Michaela told cops she was hired by the victim to wrap him like a mummy in saran wrap and glue a pair of women's boots to his feet. Saran wrap mummification is a pretty common form of mummification, and even something like that where you're encasing a person and cocooning them in saran wrap, it takes practice and it does take classes to know how to do it properly, right? Like knowing how long a person is allowed to stay in a cocoon before their body heats up too much, knowing sort of the tightness, knowing how to safely prop a person up and then bring them down so that they're not falling on their head and getting into those kinds of situations. Those are all skills that needs to be practiced for anybody engaging in BDSM. And as a bottom too, right, you should have some kind of experience, at least doing research, knowing what it feels like inside and knowing your limits in terms of mummification. There is a troubling video that shows the man had duct tape over his mouth, his head swathed in cling wrap that was further duct taped, and a plastic bag also secured with tape over his entire face and head. While the man was suffocating on the floor, Michaela performed sex acts nearby for the OnlyFans video she recorded while he suffocated to death. The plastic wrappings were left in place for a total of 8 minutes, with Dale's arms and legs also bound tightly, preventing him from removing the materials over his mouth and nose. Video shows the performer realizing something has gone horribly wrong and rushed to call 911. Cops arrived to find the woman performing CPR on the unresponsive Dale, who was declared brain dead at the hospital and days later removed from life support. His official cause of death is lack of oxygen to the brain, according to the coroner's report. So much to go over here, from understanding how risky breath play can be, to not monitoring the sub on the floor, to also kind of doing that kind of head asphyxiation in what seems like in a way that's really difficult for her to also get out in a quick way. Where should I start with this? In any sort of extreme bondage situation where the sub is completely encased, their legs are tied, their legs are bound, their arms are tied, their arms are bound, and they also can't move to indicate struggle, and they can't verbally, say anything to indicate that something is terribly wrong. There has to be such a high level of experience monitoring the person. What kind of experience does that entail, right? That entails probably having several sessions beforehand to practice and understand what does this sub look like when he's reaching, a breath limit. It also entails like understanding that there should always be some kind of safety protocol in place, even in high risk situations, such as, say, you can bind the whole body, right? But his hand is holding a ball, and the moment that ball drops, because he's unconscious or he's feeling weak or he's not feeling good, that means you're getting him out of the bondage immediately. That's like a really, really like easy way in a lot of like BDSM in practicing BDSM to indicate distress, without, totally disrupting the scene. There's also other ways to indicate stress on the body and trying to, communicate that, such as if he's tightly bound, maybe, his legs are positioned in a way where he can kind of thump it like 3 times rhythmically. That is very clear that he's struggling in a way that like it's a hard route. He has to get out of that situation. In any kind of breath play, even if it's as simple as choking, a person should never get to a place where they are like fully unconscious. Because when a person completely goes unconscious in that sort of manner, no matter how you're doing it, it's a result of a lack of oxygen to the brain. And the risk of that is always some kind of injury if you're not practiced at it. So this was really such a recipe for disaster from the get-go. I personally have done sessions like this before. So I want to talk a little bit about like what I did to prevent a horror situation like this. I have done a saran wrap mummification session with plastic bag and duct tape over the person's head. I only did the session after 1 year of meeting up with that sub. And I didn't start, jumping into the deep end. The first time we met, we talked about his level of experience. What is the psychological headspace that he's really he wants from it, right? And if my skill sets can safely create that experience and that fear without obviously like ending his life. When we started with just mummification, just a saran wrap, so that I know how his body reacts to being cocooned like that. And, his body temperature, is he sweating a lot? Is he able to be in that kind of cocoon for 20 minutes? Can he be in it for longer? Is he really comfortable? Can he be in it for like 3 hours without any issues? I also would check like when I come out of the cocoon, right, with safety scissors also. Don't use a knife. Don't use any kind of blades. Don't use even regular scissors to cut someone out of a cocoon like that. It should always be safety shears to prevent, unnecessary markings on their body, especially if the cocoon is very tight against the skin, right? And after a person's in there, even for 30 minutes, when they're sweating, it gets slippery, right? The heat's there. It can be hard to get a sharp object under there without like accidentally hurting a person. So I started with just cocooning, seeing his reaction. And then we moved on to the second segment with the second session, which is just breath play, right? No bondage, nothing. Just me seeing how long can he hold his breath for. Everyone can hold their breath differently. Some people are swimmers. They can hold their breath for, a minute or longer. No issue. Other people have asthma. They can't hold their breath at all. They have, lung capacity problems. How long can he hold his breath for? So that gives me a parameter of when he is going into deep breath play, how should I be monitoring his reactions? In that breath play session, we really took our time. And I tried different types of breath play, right? Light choking to like heavier to heavier, never letting him pass out. Then we would move on to like, okay, nose and mouth, kind of seeing how he struggles with that. Then we moved on to like a bag over the head. And obviously we were using a bag that is easy to tear apart. In case anything, goes wrong, I can just tear it apart really easily. And in that session, I wasn't duct taping the bag to his head either. It was just me holding the bag tightly and seeing how many breaths he's able to take in that bag before the oxygen is completely removed. It was me monitoring his panic, right? When he's panicking, is he saying things? Is he shuddering? Is he shutting down and not having no reactions? Just taking in all of those data points on his body. And then we had a talk after around, did this actually accomplish the fantasy that you had in your mind? Because if it doesn't, we can do safer things and recreate that experience, or we can do other things to recreate that experience. And it's a learning experience for both parties. When he said yes to all of that, then I started doing sessions where I was combining different kinds of bondage, different kinds of breath play, all the way up to the session where he's fully saran wrapped and has the bag over his head. The first time we did that, it was not a CNC scene, right? It's not a consensual non-consent scene. It was a scene where he had an out. I used the ball method, him holding a ball on his side, whereas while the rest of his body is in bondage, his mouth is taped. And that was my indication. If anything gets too stressful, he will let go of it, right? If he's starting to pass out, his hand will let go of it too. So he has to make the conscious decision during the entire play to be holding on to that ball for me to continue. After we had several sessions of me doing that and me understanding, okay, this is how much I can push, this is how much I can push, this is how much I can push, then we did the CNC scene where he had no power, he had no control, he's fully mummified, and I had complete say over how much he was breathing. The duct tape was over his head. There was duct tape underneath the bag over his mouth. Like he was only able to breathe through his nose. And in that scene, like, it was incredibly erotic and was incredibly fun. I was able to fully control how much air that he was intaking and not taking in. I knew exactly how his body would respond. If he's like wiggling in a certain way, I knew to like let go or not let go. But it was a high contact scene. In any kinds of scenes like this where the danger is so high, you absolutely cannot leave the sub alone. I would not even walk, into another room to grab a glass of water for 30 seconds. I wouldn't. It's just not good to leave a sub alone in that state when there's something actively preventing him from his, if there's something over him that's going to actively prevent his natural biological functions from occurring. Onto the part where he had the shoes glued onto him. I personally, I'm not sure what kind of glue she was using. Probably would not recommend super glue for this type of situation just because it's difficult to get off unless you can cut the shoe open. It's really hard for me to imagine other kinds of glue working and I'm assuming that the sub wanted an experience where it's like, oh, these heels or whatever are permanently on me. There's no way to escape, right? So I'm kind of imagining that it is some kind of super glue. If you're going to use super glue, I would really make sure that the shoes can come off and that you have the right materials to get the super glue off of the feet without like harming the feet too much. Even if they're consenting to it, it's really important to sometimes act as the limit for the sub. Oftentimes, DOMs will get really insane requests, and sometimes those requests are coming from like possibly not a healthy place mentally. From the sub, and it's up to us to be sort of the parameter givers for the sub and to really hold them in their space and try to like lead them into a place where they're responsibly engaging in kink. And part of it's for the community, right? Like, we get it. A lot of people has extreme kinks and fetishes, but it's a really sort of it's a really important thing for the community to show that, hey, we can be this kind of person and also do it really, really well, rather than, oh, we're into really extreme things and we just do it because we have like no thought for consequence. We have no care in the world. I think that's a really bad sort of representation of the majority of the people in the space. And unfortunately, it's always the bad situations that make it into the limelight more often than not. So even if you're gluing shoes, make sure that it's done well. Yeah, so we did that scene. He definitely got to a really deep subspace from it. And I think, the moral of the story is I think it's okay to be into what you're into, right? I think it's okay to like the extremes, but it's really important to not reach out to a random OnlyFans model who has no experience, and she said she has no experience, to do something like that. Always reach out to a professional. Always make sure that you know who you're talking to, you know sort of your own limits around what you want to experience, so that when it does happen, it's like the best thing that has ever happened to you rather than the worst thing. So that's my 2 cents on this situation, and I really hope that, from me talking about this, it will prevent other bad situations like this from happening. There is no amount of money worth these kinds of headaches. So always say no if it's a high amount, and it'll get you in trouble sometime in the future.